What's the role of South American in geopolitics? Why did America let its influence decrease in that region? It's not strategically good to have enemies down there, down south.
I guess south of us, yes.
Sorry, cough was asthma this morning. Well, you want me to answer this? Yes. Okay, so no, Spain was a very powerful influence, not only in South America, but in North America for quite a long time. And the Spanish were perhaps the most aggressive colonizers. And it was profoundly profitable for them because they were really not trying to do the same model as the French, or certainly not the English or the Dutch, and which was more trade oriented. But they were trying to export people to govern and rule the territories, as treating the South Americans as something between serfs and slaves, or well, depending on how you push it, maybe worse. So they brought the feudal model down to South America, and so which is still the reason they're having problems today. So what happened in the U.S. is that just how like sort of the world views like America as having started all these wars and stuff like that. The world, including the U.S., viewed Europeans as starting all these wars and stuff. And so as America surpassed Europe in economic productivity and economic and military power quite rapidly, actually. And so what the American agenda is to get with the Louisiana Purchase, which got us most of the way across the country, and then the ambition to get to the other side of the country, the other shore, and then with the ambition and was to get the Europeans out of North America, and then get them out of our hemisphere entirely. And so we didn't view it as let's create an empire. We created it as keep the fucking troublemakers out of here. so this is when the world turned from empires to spheres of influence. And so what is the role? But the problem was that for various reasons, because they were less developed and more feudal, there was a greater push in South America to adopt socialism and communism. And they're Christian. They have a 90 IQ sort of range down there. Some areas a little lower, some areas a little higher. And they were primarily agrarian. So they sort of had because they were feudal, because they had they were tendency to use communism and socialism as a way to overcome this feudal position. They didn't make the same leap in rapid progress that we sort of did up here. And so they kind of hurt their window of opportunity. In other words, if you're Japan or South Korea, you took on that window. You took that window of opportunity, or even today's Vietnam. You took that window of opportunity and you took advantage of it. And it's because those are more coherent civilizations, and so or countries. But in South America, it's not like the Middle East, or even like all of Middle East, or not even as bad as not even as how to say this. It's not as bad as the Middle East, or as bad as India, which is less bad than the Middle East. You didn't have this ability to transform very quickly, and all of a sudden, South America is sort of lagging behind. So what's its place what's the South America's place in the what's this geopolitical? Why is American influence decrease? American influence decrease because we just don't care anymore. I mean, Europe isn't a great power. Communism isn't a great power. They've got the South Americans are going through their own set of transitions now that they've come out of that phase and started to work there. Despite missing the easy window where they could have copied us, they are now trying to make their way in the world. The problem is it's a little bit like Australia, except with a large population, is they're kind of far from everything. So I don't really, so from a standpoint of their future as an economy, they're going to work out just fine over the next 50 to 100 years. Though, they're going to have the geographic issue that they have. They're going to continue to go through cultural and political strife. But most of us expect one of those countries, whether it's Argentina or Brazil or something, most probably likely Argentina, to turn into basically a continental power that becomes the core state of South America. And South America will be a continent. It'll be like every other continent or every other civilization. It'll have a core state, continue to go its own direction. It'll eventually develop more stable economies, etc. But so, I mean, I think, from my perspective, given that they started with a conquest that wasn't trade, but pure conquest, that they went through basically a feudalist period, that their revolution against the feudalist period was the sort of failed experiment with socialism and communism. What you really want is you want to develop a military first that's very nationalistic, and then you want to develop rule law. But no, these guys chose this. That's probably because they're lower trust. And so I see them doing fine, but it's not gonna matter. America can't really be. America is an enemy to South America, like America is an enemy to Canada. It's just a useful ploy. American influence, there is no value in us having influence down there at all. Just like America doesn't feel like we want to have influence anywhere anymore. It's too expensive. We burned down our working and laboring classes, and we burned a chunk of our middle class by paying for this huge system of world transport, finance, and trade. Basically by externalizing that hyper economy we had up until the 70s. So there's no matter of fact, the opposite's true. The more chaos there is in the world, assuming we can protect ourselves in Europe, the more chaos there is in the world, the better it is for us. So the only real issue here is that both Russia, we have Iran in trying to restore the caliphate from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. We have the Russians trying to, or at least Putin, trying to restore the Russian Empire, and we have the Chinese trying to preserve the Chinese empire, or at least try to create an alternative authoritarianism to Western rule of law. And so, like always, we have a long history. This is America is not completing a war, right? Because we have the European mindset of the minimum break in political achievement is sufficient to declare victory because we all have common interests. This is where there's a great book on the difference in psychological differences between different civilizations and how they perceive the war and the resolution of warfare. Like Islam doesn't do that. I mean, they're like, we need you all destroyed and reduced to ashes before, doing this before we've won. So with this sort of mentality, we didn't finish World War II, which was the end of empires and the birth of the federations and nation states, and the end of empires as monopoly trade networks, and the birth of federations and nation states in free trade. So that's what we were trying to bring about, and as usual, we cut the effort early. So, to answer the question, what's the role of the South American geopolitics? It's a I don't want to call it. They call it developing. It's not developing. They're using a new word for it now, but it's a developing area that has not yet formed a core state sufficient. In other words, enough internal coherence and enough of a core state to act as a political actor on its own in the world. This is why you see this tepid attempt to play what's this alternative that Russia and China are putting, the BRICS,
BRICS
which
country.
is not, it's a failed, it's never going to work. So what you need is every civilization needs a core state, and the core state needs to organize other states in its region into some geostrategic position that they can work together to help their civilization or continent. And so that'll happen, and that's what we see happening over time. America's influence is decreasing in the region because there's no value to have increase in the region. At least there certainly wasn't until this reemergence of the attempt to restore empires. And strategically good to have enemies down there too. We don't really have enemies. We have people is still trying to assert their power, and we are trying to withdraw from that region, like we are from the Middle East, like we are from everywhere, without our withdrawal of influence, political influence, economic influence, and strategic influence, without that leading to further catastrophe. Just as you saw, our retrenchment after 2001 has led to more catastrophe than otherwise. So I actually that was a pretty good overall explanation of America's strategic policy, the condition, the reasons for South America, and the general condition of the world right now. But yeah, I think it's kind of odd when you look at that we have enemies down. We don't have enemies. We have people we have teenagers. They're trying to grow into adults and are rebelling as they leave home. That's all that's happening. It's nothing more than that.
So a couple points of that, Kurt. I think the term you were looking for is emerging countries. They replaced developing nations because it sounds too backward into emerging nations.
Yes.
And I remember reading, this is probably close to 20 years ago now. So Peter Zions' former boss, George Friedman, wrote a series of geopolitical white papers. One of them is on the United States. And one thing that he drove home is for a continental power like the United States with ports down in the Gulf of Mexico, it is in the U.S. interest to secure that entire area and keep Central America and South America fairly weak. So what we see is a collection of small and relatively weak states.
I don't. George has an audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to. George isn't like Peter. Peter considered himself an investor's audience, and George considered himself the militaries.
Yeah.
Right. And so our position with the Gulf is that we need to prevent foreign like other continental influences from establishing military and restoring the problem we had that we spent the 19th century fixing. The fact that we want to say that we don't want strong states down there is false. We want the opposite. We want strong states down there. We just want strong national states that operate in cooperative interests, both between us and South America. We don't want them to be Russian or Chinese or Iranic or some God knows what else's interests that are not in favor of continuing free trade. Because really that's America's thing, right? It's free trade makes us wealthy. And when you don't have free trade, everybody gets poorer and you have wars.
And I would say we can't have a unifying political force down in South America or Central America enough to challenge the North America continent.
Correct. I hope I'm
Uh,
okay with that. I feel more comfortable with that answer than a lot of them.
as always, I don't agree that America's strategy is altruistic and not imperialistic.
Well, I mean, so this is I actually love that we have this dispute, so that because it's evidence that we're intellectually honest in this organization. But again, to be an empire is to us is it's sort of an empire, federation, and a religion. And so these are three different systems. An empire means that there's a central control and of the economy and military and especially military. A federation means that there's independent control and cooperation, free trade, and a religion is basically as more of a social. So you have state, commercial, and social, right? Which is the triangular. You have the triangle of forces that are always trying to assert themselves in their own interests, and then it's going to be religion for the lower classes, the state for the ascending classes, and commerce for the most developed classes, and that's always going to be the case. So I don't see it as any miracle that these three factors, which are the only three means of human coercion, should emerge and always be at play in the world. Now, your view is that America is trying to be imperial, and I want to get back to my usual point with you, which is that America's military and geostrategic policy is what it is, right? It is, I'm pretty sure it's what I'm saying, because military is very practical. When we get to the social bullshit that's under this woke left-wing attempt to conquer America by the sequence of neo-Marxism, which is cultural Marxism, what we call race Marxism, and feminism, which is called we call it family or sex Marxism, and then all justified by postmodernism, which is truth Marxism. This whole sequence of underminings, well, they've been successful in permeating us, and it's been successful in turning the clerical classes, not the military and strategic classes, but the clerical classes that are engaged in that are members of what we call the State Department, the government, the policy sets, especially the State Department. And then because our financial institutions have been captured by you know who, this has turned out to be a dichotomy between the geostrategic interests of the country and its military and economic interests, which is how the grown-ups handle it. And then this clerical class, which of course I bitch about, right? I mean, the clerical class and women, I mean, and they work together, so that's the problem. The clerical class, women, and you know who in their financialization, they work together. So we have this bifurcation of strategies. Unfortunately, what the public generally sees and hears is the talking part, not the acting part. And so I agree with Martin in the sense, if you want to say there's an imperial ambition among the left-wing faith that rides on top of American military and economic geostrategic policy, I totally agree with that. But the way you position it is that they're homogenous, and they're not. And the way I position it is, yeah, you're right. These people are a problem. They're also fixable, right? Because they're the problem for the world, just like they're the problem for us. But if you look at the geostrategic policy that America implements, that's not true. It's not only in everybody's interest, it's been the most dramatic improvement in human quality of life in all of history combined. There's no comparison. Look what we've done with humanity in just a few, it's actually decades, and it's not even too many centuries yet, by this strategy. I mean, look, we've lifted out of poverty. So I understand your interpretation. Furthermore, I understand the world's interpretation, and best of all, I understand how it's so antagonistic to the Chinese, the Russians, the Muslims, and even the Indians now, is because it's fucking decadent. Well, decadent is a nice word because it means more. We think it's just moral or something like that, but it's not decadent. It's actually a religious warfare that's using our geostrategic platform as a launching pad, the same way the previous religions used previous empires as the launching pad. So I don't think it's in our interest, or in other words, the interest of the world, the interest of solving the problem of ending this Marxist sequence as a religion that is attempting to destroy the world through creating disharmony, or our interests, the America's interests, as trying to solve the problem, or American and Europe's interests in trying to solve this problem by separating these two issues. And I certainly don't think it's in the Institute's interest to confuse the two issues. I think we should say, well, the underlying attempt, the post-war attempt for geostrategic attempt, which was the ending of empires and their monopolies over trade, which were leaving people in captured in economic poverty because of the or being preyed upon by those empires. The desire to bring the rest of the world with us into nation states and federations with core states to help organize those civilizations. That's I mean, I see it as the necessary direction of all evolution. So I just think it's wrong to confuse the two. It doesn't mean I disagree with your assessment. It means that I think you're conflating two things, and it's not in anyone's interest.
I see the issue here in the middle of that, in that you point out that quality of life has increased, but I look more so at what it has done to fertility rate and replacement rates.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody pointed out, in this respect, South Korea is more genocidal than North Korea.
That's right.
Sorry about my voice.
Right, but again, the problem we face, right? Just as our organization, our mission faces, is that what's the problem? The problem's women, right?
And where did that indoctrination come from?
Right, but that indoctrination comes from the Marxist sequence. And then Marxist sequence is failed in Europe, right? Because it created the communism, it failed. But when they came to America, they changed it. They changed it to cultural, sex, and truth and race Marxism.
And now they're spreading it again from America to Europe.
I totally agree. But
which America enabled by being in control of Europe in practice.
Right. But again, is that the same thing? Is again, is that what the military is trying to do and the geostrategic people are trying to do? Or is that, in other words, is that what the military wing is doing? Or is that what the political wing is doing?
If they weren't doing this, that it was their duty to prevent it, and they didn't.
Okay, then that's the same argument against the Queen, the monarchy, is that their duty was to prevent it, is not. Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that as an accusation of another example of the continued male failure to prevent female dysfunction and the clerisy from arising because the women are happy to buy into these matters. I mean I probably can't. I mean, I can help to educate the audience, which is to say, yeah, understand what's going on, so you can cure the problem, which is the Marxist sequence and the clerisy that brings it about, and the financial network that is supporting that change, and the women who especially single women, because they're so attention seeking and stimulation seeking, and those are because the women are the easy what do you call it? Victims is the wrong word. They're easily captured and and mobilized for this purpose. So I look at solving the problem which is solvable. I don't look at this moral blame that seeks to say, well, let's just make America go away or whatever. I mean, that's not going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is solving the cause of it. So that's why I focus on what I do. It's like I focus on first principles anywhere, is that I want to end this this Marxist sequence, female acolytes, resulting in credentialism, resulting in political influence, resulting in using the platform of the United States as, or the Anglosphere really, is trying to do to create a world of free trade, largely because we're naval civilizations. And I want to solve that problem and make that go away, but I don't want to make, you know, the other advantages that we're bringing to ourselves or others go away. Let's address the real problem. You talked about the fertility rate problem, the marriage rate problem. This is all just the consequences of bringing women into the polity and in democratic polities, right? Bring women to the democratic franchise without laws that equally suppress female antisocial behavior, which is, you know, realistically worse than male. I mean, males are merely violent and criminal, right? They, you know, but things go on. But women are, turns out, they're profoundly undermining, and this is why I'm so depressed about it. I mean, I don't want this to be true, but it is. So let's fix the real problem for everybody. Let's just not, you know, see if we can make a simple moral argument about something so that we can feel morally activated, and so that we can rebel against the whole group or something, instead of actually, you know, surgically and if necessary with pointy objects, fix the underlying problem. The underlying problem is women are incompatible with a democratic society because their interests are hostile to what makes cooperation at large scale possible, by the suppression of all parasitism, free riding, rent-seeking, corruption, etc., at every scale. Except women do just the opposite. Their instinct is to do just the opposite, which is to hyper-consume, free ride, hold themselves and no one else accountable, and just hope like magic daddy and, you know, takes care of everything for them.
Yeah, we can point out which state made it their mission to make the world safe for democracy.
Yeah, well, I mean, democracy, what? We, you know, when did we figure out women are going to be this bad? It wasn't in 1945.
Well, we knew it.
Well, we some of us knew it, yes. Like, but that's the whole problem. About 10% of us think. So what are we going to do? You know, your argument, I think, is that democracy is a failed experiment. Is that right?
It's been known since the ancients, and we're
Right.
still doing it.
But my argument is rule of law isn't a failed experiment.
Sure.
Right. So I think what I do instead, which is different from you, is that I say, I'm going to try further to figure out if there's any way I can maintain public participation in the selection of priorities for in the production of commons that we call legislation, in politics and legislation. I want to see if I can produce a means by which we continue the game men created for producing markets for cooperation between classes to include women. And I think it's very difficult, but in my perception from the solutions I've come up with is that if we do so, we will train women to behave correctly, more so than we will if we cut them entirely out of the process. So that's my...
They didn't need the vote and they didn't ask for it at the time. So I don't see why we couldn't get back to that point.
But then we run the risk of half a population not, how shall I put it, not able to evolve to become more stoic.
See, this is my argument. This is my argument too.
And do we want more?
Let me put it a different way.
Feminine women.
Women used to know, like what you're bringing up is women used to know they were a problem in politics, right? They used to understand themselves, right? So, and our religion was not exactly harmful in sedating their impulses by giving them rituals and ethics. Now, so I'm not convinced, and I know this is an older guy thing, right? And you're a young man and you want clarity and certainty. But from my understanding, if you put institutions in place, especially if they have teachings in them, in other words, that if you put institutions in place, whether it be a religious law or political command, religious law, or constitutional law, if you put in place that these are the antisocial behavior of this class and that we need to suppress it, which is something you and I, Martin, we've worked on this problem in more detail than anyone in history.
I'm all for educating women as long as it's also actually education for women and not some propaganda.
Okay. So I want to put it in the law, which will require it be in the education. And I think that if we do that and we separate women into a different house, that we may be able to maintain at least women with children in the voting pool. And I want to propose that solution first because I'm pretty sure it will work. And secondly, because I believe it's a way to it's actually a problem that's solvable, whereas cutting women off is gonna create a lot of negative. In other words, it's going to create so much resistance that it may suppress every other initiative we have.
I see House for Women, not so much as in keeping them in politics, but as in containing them.
Yes, exactly.
Well, what if we run?
This is why Martin and I are really good together for the audience.
I'm thinking we can run experiments under different policies, right? And
Correct.
And given enough time and looking at the trajectory of those civilizations and nations, we can figure out which one's right.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've been saying this before, is that, and it's like, I'm like, I just got to get I have a few things in my life I'm almost getting over with. And then Martin and I get back worked on this stuff. If we get this in the Constitution, right, we can show people that they don't have to understand our fucking volumes of other shit, right? They can look at the Constitution, see what is in there, and we just need to get to that point. Because really, it's none of these problems. I mean, we've solved the problems. We just got to put them in place so that we restore the ability for people to cooperate by organized means of markets and politics, rather than try to conduct warfare external to politics by this propaganda, deceit, and whatever else crap is going on. It's just frustrating that it's not impossible to make this work. Anyway.
I also recall that during one work session, I asked what would women even vote in their own house about, and you suggested the Declaration of the Commons.
Yes, I believe that if there is criteria, I believe that's the wrong word. I'm confident, and I'm probably certain that if we store criteria for voting, right? Number one, in other words, you have to demonstrate ability, capacity of responsibility, because this whole representation thing doesn't make any sense. because it doesn't make any sense at all. You have, as long as you have defense, juridical defense, and we all do, and it's all equal, that's fine. But to be able to assert power in politics, if you haven't demonstrated competency, that's not okay. And we've seen that this has been a failed experiment. It's created a race to the bottom. Now, you can solve this problem by creating houses for the classes, right? Which is what you and I have recommended. But what we've done is we've produced basically a menu. So, in other words, I'm trying to get to supporting Francis's argument. We've produced a menu of different choices that the states can try, right, without forcing everybody to do it. And you know what? We're pretty confident we know it will work. People gravitate to those places, right? The places will have higher results, and then the market for political demonstration of success will do its job.
But several of the later amendments imposed some horrible policies on the whole country.
Well, I mean, I might even say that no, you're supposed to, wasn't most everything supposed to originate in the House? Anyway, we don't enforce this too well. I would say don't let policy originate in the women's house, maybe. I don't know.
I would say that yes, some of these later amendments, I think, start with what, the 14s. That's when things start to go downhill. They had, long at the time, it may sound nice, but they had uncalculable long-term catastrophic results. But that's not a argument against not experimenting.
That's right.
So having multiple nations, multiple polities try and experiment is the fastest way to get to the quote correct answer. Versus,
Right.
I think we have the correct answer, let's make everybody adopt it. Because it could be long term, that could be a catastrophic answer.
Well, I am saying those amendments were the opposite because it was imposed on the whole, empire at that point.
Yeah. So instead of imposed on every polity within the American Empire, it should be more of a federation, which is where we went wrong with the Civil War.
Well, I mean, even then we went wrong. If our goal was that we were in extraordinary fear of continued conquest by Europeans, that we felt only safe if we had containment between the shores, it was as a temporary measure, it was at least logical, right? I mean, it was strategically logical. Even today, the incredible advantage we have in North America is we have this enormous fucking island with access to every bit of water there is, and across it we have basically 3 geographic zones. We have the green forest, the plains, the deserts, and the West Pacific coastal wet zones. I mean, we have this great thing, and fucking every resource you can want is between here and Canada, right? I mean, it's a huge advantage. So the only thing that would really cause us geostrategic problem is having a hostile power in the continent. So that's really what you're trying to hold together. So I can understand that doing it. The problem is they didn't do it like the Romans would, which was, until this mission is fulfilled, this is what we're doing, and then we're going back to this.
Inertia just kept going. So by what, the early 1900s, they've already secured the continent. Right. They should say, well, then let's go back to federation rather than another 120 years of empire building. And
the only thing that I haven't cursed too much in this episode, so I'm trying not to. The only thing that interfered with that was the world wars, really. Well, first of all, it's the communist thing, but then it was the world wars. They really set us up for not discontinuing our relative isolationism, really. And so we would have been much better off if you know, the World Wars really messed up this whole thing. I mean, in some ways, it's the event that ends the age of empires, right? But in others, it's like, well, yeah, but it created us, as Martin would try to say, as a pseudo empire that over the geostrategic interests of which overcame the interests of the people. Well, we've had a couple of good things here.
So we spent a lot of time on that question because we went on a tangent. There's
You know,
somebody
like,
asked a question related to women's house in the YouTube chat. Do you want to pick that up now or just have them add to the queue?
No, I'd rather answer it while it's in mind.
Okay.
I have to leave. I should have said this when we first started, but I have to leave shortly. So can we, if we finish this answer,
Yeah.
can we?
So the question asked by Shade Forest is, could you elaborate on the function of the women's house or other houses? I understand the broad concept, but I would appreciate more refined details.
Great question, brilliant question. Okay. There's, so we live, people call us living in a democracy. We don't. We live in a concurrent democracy. And concurrency means, just as in common law, when it means what we have in common law means what all the jurisdictions that solve a problem tend to coalesce and agree on. So what we have empirically discovered over time is common in our legal judgments. Right? So it's common law. So that's what we do. So the thing is that people are pretty much equal in what we don't like. Right? We don't like our shit stolen, or we don't like to be heard, but we're not equal in what we do like. So we use concurrency instead of commonality. So concurrency means in the positive things, which means legislation, we try to find agreement between classes and regions. So you would have the nobility in England. The nobility is a class. You would have the House of Commons, which was people who owned land, basically farmers and small businessmen. And at the bottom, you would have the church, which would not actually, which would represent the people as in the government, but there would not be, you would not recognize it as a house. But there were three houses. There was a house of the nobility, which was the territories. There was a house of the, which would be the states for us. There was a house of business, which is what the House of Representatives in America was meant to be. And then there would have been the church, and the church representation of the people at the bottom. What we should have done is create a new house for the people who didn't own property. In other words, the people, right? We should have done that, and then we would maintain the market between the classes. Furthermore, when we brought women in, because they have the opposite of all immoral instincts from all men, or if they're even, I can't, this is depressing me so much I can't talk about the women anymore. We should have had a house of women if we're going to order them in. And then you have the regions, and the classes and the sexes, all in markets, that all these markets have to agree, achieving concurrency between classes and regions. That's the idea of it. And so it's not, what it really means is the purpose of concurrency is to prevent the harms to the minority factions rather than achieve the goals of the majority. Does that make sense? That's what concurrent democracy means. Our concurrent democracy is meant to protect small interests rather than to advance majority interests. So what this does is it drives people into a need to develop consensus across regions and classes before they can enact policy. This means our government, unlike British government, is set up to debate. It's not set up to govern. Does that mean this is so? And the fact that this isn't like something you teach to kindergartners, right, is fucking beyond me, right? But that's how we're set up. And the reason is it's to maintain this liberty, liberty and sovereignty of all peoples to have their live the lives according to their wishes. So when America was founded, we had French regions and German regions and Dutch regions and English regions and Scots-Irish regions and whatever. And this was meant to, this whole system was meant to, just like the Holy Roman Empire of the, which is, I mean, Martin's people are part of, it's like the Holy Roman Empire. You're said we had people, what they used to call, you guys were Bohemia, is that what they called you? Bohemia?
Yes, Bohemian Empire, kingdom.
Yes. So we had all these people. I need to. I have too many things to shut off here. So what we were meant was supposed to be a loose federation, just like the Holy Roman Empire, that that provided this security for the territory and all people within it, provided them with a uniform government and basic rights under this rule of law, and then the individual cultures could pursue their interests of their own accord. Right? The Civil War is what broke this, and the Civil War is basically over the expansion into the westward, the new conquered territory, the newly obtained territories in the West. And what would have happened is the South would have won that contest, and then industrial North was afraid. And so they used slavery as the reason for it, but it's actually just the northern Anglos, my folks, against the southern Scotch Irish. It was really nothing more, which is a class thing. Right. So anyway, so did I get my point across there? Does that make sense? I think I forgot what what question I was answering. Can you tell me
just to be clear,
so
it's not what you're talking about is not what the system is, but what it should have been.
Right. I'm saying that we made a series of mistakes. I'm trying to go on Francis's theme. We made a series of mistakes that were to conquer the continent, to produce our own security, and to drive Europeans out of the area because there are wars and feudalism, and then the world wars happened, and that further amplified the problem. And in the post-war period, our need to try to bring humanity up out of poverty to prevent another world war has further confirmed it. So in that sense, we've produced what you're saying, and what I try to always say is that it is possible to reform our law to reverse these failures that were not conducted as experiments, which is a conceptual problem in our political framework, because the Romans didn't have this conceptual problem. The Romans were aware that you might have to have a dictator for a short period of time to achieve an end, but then you would always go back to the Republic. The Americans should have understood that our federation is built on this model. We may have to exert authority for a short period of time, but we always go back to this model. Sometime in there, around the World War period, that concept vanished.